artist talk. If y'all are interested in listening, feel free to kind of gather around this space. We have 7 of our 8 exhibitors here with us tonight. This is the kickoff to our 2025 programming season, From the Earth, where we are celebrating work that's done with natural materials. And tonight we're opening local clay in this gallery and Expressions in Mud, which is a mud painting exhibition in the Tier Gallery. We have 7 of our 8 clay artists with us here tonight, and so I think we're just going to let y'all hear from them. And if there are any questions at the end and we have time, we'll take those. So we're going to kick things off with Kerry Kennedy.
Hello. So a lot of y'all know that I was a studio artist here until last year. 17, almost 18 years here. I really found my voice in that studio. I loved that studio. It was crazy how rustic it was when I first moved in. We had 40 buckets catching drips. We had a water feature. I had a roof over one room that went into a gutter that went to a bucket because there was a hole about that big in the roof. And if you've gone into that space, you see that that has transformed into a beautiful space that is so conducive to art. And it's now a community space. It's a space being used for teaching and bringing clay to a lot more people. And that is my heart just overwhelms with that, because I remember when I was taking ceramics, I was in my 20s, I was so, everybody should be doing this. Everybody should be able to learn how to do this. And the professor was like, why would we want that? We don't want them in here. You know, it just made it sound like, no, this is an educational space for the academic mind, you know, not the community. So I got out of school and just had to start my own thing. I had to start with, you know, I had a studio above a fish store for a while. I had my studio in a basement for a while. I had my studio in a little portable building for a while. And it was, everyone was an upgrade, everyone was a step up. But when I got my space here, it was just like, I felt like a real artist. I felt like I was a real artist. And so I'm so grateful for that. And I'm so grateful that clay has been there in my life. It's such an endless medium because you can do anything with it. It's everywhere, and you can do anything from computers made out of hand building to this organic, beautiful sculptural work and functional work. And everyone's personality is on display when you see it. And I love that. I love that. I love that Kentuck took a chance on me and took a chance on this beautiful community studio idea. That I knew was right. I knew it was right. I knew it was what people wanted, and to see it manifest so much creativity is just, it's a real gift. So, and my bowls are over there, and the reason I chose bowls is that was the first thing I really dug in deep to learn how to throw. I had a kind of a manic professor who was just like, if you know, you know. And he was like, okay, what do you want to do? And I was like, well, I want to throw. And he goes, well, pick a form. And I said, bowls. And he goes, make 50 and bring them back tomorrow. And so by the end of the summer, I had 50. I mean, I was there 8 hours a day. And I learned to work through him because I took that forward and I learned how to throw handle or pull handles. I was like, okay, I'm gonna make 50. I only got 30, but by the 20th, I was like, I wasn't thinking about how to make the handle, but how to make the handle better. So I learned that, and so that's why I bought bowls, because I still love a good bowl and the utility of it for your food, for your serving, for bringing people together through food and serving. So that's it.
Thank you.
You're next, okay?
I'm doing good. So my name's Amy Smoot. Hi. I'm seeing all these students and my students.
So my name is Amy Smoot, and I made the computer. I'm the Clay Studio Manager here at Kentuck, where I teach all the ceramic classes, and I help with the Red Dog Potters. I just love being in this space. I'm so grateful for Kerry for just getting the space that I get to teach classes out of, just so in such a good state that it was so seamless getting in there and starting up. So I'm forever grateful for Kerry and all of her hard work and her impact at Kentuck. About my work, I haven't always made computers and nostalgic things. I started out as just like anyone does, kind of dabbling in this and that, in ceramics, pottery, hand building. When I ended my undergrad education, I was doing a lot of figurative work about my personal life that was just kind of sad and dreary, and when I got to grad school at UA, I kind of continued that work, and by my second year I had enough. I was done with the sad stuff. I was ready to kind of delve into something that I enjoyed making and that had like warm, soft memories for me versus things that were kind of emotional and sad and all that kind of baggage. So while they do still have a personal impact and personal meaning to me, like there's also that universal connection with other people. Everyone's memories with these kind of machines and objects from different periods of time, they differ, but there's somewhat of that universal experience. So I started making CD players, old TV sets, and just all kinds of stuff I can get my hands on, old cell phones, to make these installations, and they were made via mold making. So I would take the object, take some plaster, cast that object to get a direct replica. But once it started when I had, Neil had asked me to do a show at Kentuck in 2022, I believe, and I wanted to start with new work, with fresh work, maybe the same ideas, nostalgia based, but hand-built work, not relying on these molds that I no longer really had space for, and they were tucked into my storage unit. So I wanted to hand build objects, so I started really small with these computers that I just have. I love old forms of these computers. I love looking at different photos of different models, and I love borrowing from one computer to the next. So this isn't based off one complete computer. I've stole all these design elements from different ones. So I was making these tiny little computers for that show that I can fire in my little kiln because I wasn't here yet. So when this show was happening, I was like, okay, I think I'm ready for a big computer. And I really very much enjoyed building it and painting it. And I love just adding little universal things, like maybe everyone has heard of The Sims, maybe they've even played it. But just kind of taking these little funny things and putting them on the screens, using the screen as my canvas, but also paying attention to these little details that make the computer a whole. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Hi everybody, it's nice to see you all here. My name is Meg Howton. I have the work on the end. It's the strawberries and blueberries. I teach at the University of Alabama. I teach ceramics there. I'm full-time instructor, and I actually did my undergrad there. I went off and did my post-bac at the University of Florida. Then I did my master's degree at Southern Illinois University, and I had the privilege of learning from somebody who was really talented in both sculpture and functional things while I was there. And in my time there, I focused mainly on my sculpture. And then after that was kind of done, I felt like I had kind of like exhausted some of the ideas, or like, my brain kind of needed a rest. And so I kind of would always go back and forth between the functional and the sculptural. And so coming here, I was like, oh, I definitely want to kind of delve into the functional stuff a little bit more. And so I think that there's something really special about a handmade object too, the way that we interact with these things, the way that we're making them and taking all this time, and it becomes like a ritualistic part of our day. And so I think kind of adding this pause in like all of our kind of crazy lives to kind of think about like, oh, my cup of coffee is in this handmade thing that someone spent hours on. I think it's such a beautiful thing. And so I want to add some like joy to things by putting like, you know, the playful motifs on there and things like that. But yeah, so I mainly wheel throw these things and then I'm altering them by hand after. But yeah. Well, thank y'all so much. It's lovely to meet y'all. Come say hey to me after.
Hello, thanks for coming out. My name is Daniel Livingston. I've been associated with the Kentuck group since '74. This was basically a dirt lot. And it's been a great time being with the organization. I primarily do raku pottery, which is this stuff here. It's a rapid fire process, about 500-year-olds introduced by the Japanese. It's an easy process to do. It's a little difficult to master, but it's a fun process. If you're afraid of fire, this is not the ceramic process. Basically, once heard a statement about good writers borrow, great writers steal outright. So I've always just stolen outright. Basically, most of my work is based on shapes in nature. Nature kind of does away with the unnecessary. That's kind of what I'm shooting for in my work, to where it looks like it's kind of always been there, just occurred naturally. My colors come from bugs. There again, if you look at all the different types of beetles, that's where I get my colors from. So that's what I'm talking about. I just steal outright. Why bother knocking yourself out doing things that you don't need to do? I've been with this organization, like I said, since '74. I was at the festival for 30 years demonstrating this process. I think pretty much everyone has probably seen it at some time or other. And it's an interesting process. Like I said, you have to get in the fire to do it. And that's what makes it fun as far as I'm concerned. I've always been a closet kleptomaniac.
Pyromaniac.
But anyway, that's pretty much what I do. And I'm pretty much retired now. And I do this when I get the urge to do it. So I'm not tied down doing it all the time anymore.
Gabby, you want to sneak downstairs?
Amy and I shop at the same. I'm Lee Busby. I do pottery and sculpture and generally combine them. When I was in high school, I was not a good enough athlete to play football or basketball or baseball. So I knew I'd have to find something that nobody else wanted to do or could do. And so I took up pole vaulting, which is kind of halfway between sport and voodoo black art. But I didn't have a lot of competition. I'm not a great sculptor, I'm not a great potter, but I'm okay at both. And usually if I combine them, A, nobody else is doing it, and B, one distracts from the blemishes of the other. So, you know, if the vessel is not perfect or has blemishes, I can always create a sculpture over the blemish and people go, ooh, instead of, well, you know, it's not right. But I do them in different ways. Sometimes I do them from the inside out, and I will, while the piece is still fairly wet, I'll go down inside it and push noses out and lips out a little bit in this part, and you know, eyes in, and then come in and add clay to it afterwards. And that's how some of them do. I can also I can actually just sculpt the face on the table and cut it out and then kind of clay weld it. And again, the secret is concealment. So then I can think of some reason to invent something going around that so that scar is not nearly as visible or noticeable. And I have a lot of fun doing it. This was nothing, but I felt swirly when it came time to put the handles on. And again, I didn't find a lot of people making handles like this. That's what I do. If obviously you can't get your hand down in here, so you have to do that before you put the top on, and then come back in and put the top on and add the handles. And yeah, I've been around here for a while, not as long as the kleptomaniac. I'm glad you didn't say kleptomaniac. Thanks.
Hello everyone, thanks for coming. My name's Carol Lammon, and I've been a potter for about 10 years. I am a retired nurse, and once I retired, I took classes in Ollie in pottery. Some of my instructors are here tonight. Linda Lockman and Fred Mitchell and Nancy Mayo and Bob Ware taught those classes, and it was fabulous. You know, I've always collected pottery, but I never had the chance to get my hands into clay until I retired. And once I got my hands in clay, it was all over. I have been doing this, like I said, for about 10 years. I tried to join the co-op almost immediately after I took those classes, and of course there was a long waiting list. So I, as Fred said, created a studio at home. I threw a tarp down on the floor, I bought a wheel, and I started making pottery in the corner of my living room. Now, when the pottery covered the dining room table and the bed in the bedroom and most of the other available surfaces in the house, I had to start looking for a place to fire my pottery. And I found the Shelby County Arts Council, and they are wonderful people, and they had a spot for me. Unfortunately, it's a 3-hour round trip from my house. So I did that once a week for about a year and a half until I was able to join Kentuck, and I've been a member here ever since that time. When you look at my pottery, and it's over there at first table, I think you can see that my pottery is inspired by antiques and organics and old lace. And when I think about where that comes from, the person I have to give credit to is my grandmother. My grandmother, Murdy, was a very talented lady. Now, to give you a little background before I tell you a little bit about Murdy, I spent my elementary school years in Illinois, right outside of Chicago. So when Daddy retired from the Navy and we moved south, I got to spend time with my grandparents. And let me tell you, that was an eye-opening experience for a city kid. Their house was just a little house, little frame house, did not have a proper foundation under it, was built on stacks of rocks. There was a single light bulb in the center of every room with a pull chain. There was no indoor plumbing. There was an outhouse. I learned that there is a very good use for last year's Sears catalog. I took baths in number 2 wash tubs under the peach tree where you put the water to get warm. So I learned a lot of things of a different way of living, an older way of living. It taught me to appreciate old things, the form and function of old things. My grandparents' house was filled with pottery jugs and crocks and yellowware and wooden dough bowls, and all of those kinds of things are the things that I use as forms and as inspiration for the kinds of things that I like to make. Now, I'm also inspired by natural things, the texture in leaf veins, the texture in bark. rocks, shells, twigs. I find myself picking up all of these different things to use to create texture in my pottery. The other thing that I really like is old lace. Now, my grandmother was an expert quilter, and she was an expert crocheter. And on the weekends, especially in the wintertime, all the ladies in the community would gather around a quilt frame in my grandmother's house, and they would make these beautiful, intricate patterns. Or they'd be sitting around and they'd be crocheting, and beautiful lace and doilies and tablecloths and bedspreads, huge things would flow out of these crochet needles. And I learned to really appreciate those patterns. I collect old lace and doilies. I bet I have at least 100 different patterns in my pottery shop right now. And people bring them to me, they give them to me. That blue bowl over there has a piece of lace on the inside of it that's over 100 years old that a friend gave to me. It belonged to her great-grandmother. So I love these old things that you can use to create useful, functional pottery today. I also like to add other elements to my pottery. If you look at the lamp or you look at the kettle, you'll see that there's some elements of turned wood. Now, in the early days, especially with the lamp, I have to give credit to my neighbor, the late George Shelton. He was a fabulous woodworker, and he used to make these beautiful turned lamps and a lot of other gorgeous furniture and pieces. But he talked to me about making lamps. He said, you should try this, you should make lamps. He taught me how to wire them. He turned the wood for them initially, and he also taught my husband how to turn. Now, my husband is the one that turned the pieces for those pieces of pottery. And so George was a big inspiration to both of us. He taught us how to do a lot of the creative things that we do today. I think that when you make something handmade, at least in my case, it has a story. If you are going to buy something handmade and you have the chance to talk to the artist, ask them about that piece. What inspired it? How was it made? What materials were used? What does it mean to the artist? Because it'll mean more to you if you have that story. So I thank you for coming tonight. I thank you for listening. If you have any questions about the stories, I'll be around later.
Hey, I'm Dobbins. I work out of the Red Dog Potter Studio as well. And first thing I wanted to talk about was the clay that I use. I actually do use local clay. I have a sweet spot down on the river where I like to get it. I get the canoe or a kayak and I go down and get it. It's really beautiful. There's the red clay and the mica on it. Go swimming, sometimes have a couple of beers, and then I dig it, bag it up, put it in the canoe, and then I'll take it to the studio. I'll put it in a 5-gallon bucket. I cover it with water to flake it down so it's the consistency of mud, and I kind of work it with my hands. And then I take it and I put it out on either a plaster pad or some canvas, and I let it stiffen up to the right consistency. Then I wedge it up, which is kind of like kneading dough. It gets the air bubbles out, gets all the particles mixed up together. And then you can use it just like store-bought clay. You know, to me, digging my own clay is very spiritual. It's also very special to me because the clay bank where I go is in a spot that I know was used by the Native Americans, give or take 1,000 years of erosion, but I know it's the right spot. So it's very grounding for me. It's a lot of people say, you know, that's a lot of work to do, you know, for clay. And I just love it. I feel like the elements are there, the fire, water, earth, spirit, air, and it really means a lot to me to do that. So I have a couple of pieces over here that there's actually 1, 2, 3, 4. There's about 5 pieces that are that clay that fires a brick red, and then I used some Hurricane Creek clay. It's kind of a older piece. It's a special creek. My dad swam in it. It was one of the last places I hung out with my dad before he passed away. And I found that clay vein, and I use it. And then I stopped using it because it's a small vein, and I couldn't find any more clay out there. So I just quit using that. It also takes a lot to process. But Lady of the Tree is the Hurricane Creek clay. So that's how I process it. That's the kind of clay I use. Recently I've been getting into the goddesses. Just spoke to me, you know. I feel like our patriarchy, the way this country is organized, the way most of the world is organized, is not working. It is definitely not working, and I think that we need to go back to the old days. And I think a lot of people around this country and around the world are going back to the old days. It's magic, you know, and I think part of what I do building with this clay is magic. And so I have 3 goddesses here. I have Hecate, she's an ancient Greek goddess. She led people in and out of the underworld with torches. She's the goddess of the moon. She's also associated with snakes because they shed their skin, and keys because it's the key to the underworld. Also magic. She protects magic. And then there's Bridget. She's a Celtic goddess of smithing and poetry, fertility, and her planet is the sun. Not really a planet, it's a star. And then I have Gaia there, who's Mother Earth. She protects women and children and also the earth and all of the natural things in it. And the reason I started doing them is because we need protection right now, especially women and children. And I'm very passionate about that, and that's what I do.
Thank you all for being here tonight. We are about to start our mud painting exhibition or Artist Talks in the Tier Gallery, but I think our clay artists are going to maybe hang around for a few minutes if you have any questions, so feel free to grab them. And yeah, enjoy the rest of our night. If you're an artist, please stick around for a photo.